Hey, how's it going, YouTube? Today we're going to be talking about the most exciting feature of the Ronin-S, the infinite spin. For those who don't know what infinite spin is, it's basically like this. Infinite spin. So you position your Ronin in what they call a flashlight mode, or basically just flat to the ground, and you can spin the camera infinitely, hence infinite spin. Now I recommend you to set this at mode 2 or 3, so you can switch to user 3 when you want to use infinite spin, and switch back to user 1 whenever you're done with it. So here's how you set up your Ronin for the infinite spin. You open your Ronin app, you go to configurations, control settings, channel, and then you disable channel 2, which is normally pan, and then you change channel 3 to roll. Then you grab your gimbal, get into flashlight mode, and then you can start spinning. And that's pretty much it. But here are some quick tips on how you can use infinite spin. Now the first thing actually that you have to stay back in the app. Remember when we disable channel 2 of pan, I also recommend you to disable channel 1, which is tilt. You don't need to disable that to get to infinite spin. But when you're playing with the joystick, you're gonna accidentally push it up or down a little bit. And that's actually enough to throw off the balance, and the gimbal will just freak out because it will try to tilt up while spinning. So I recommend you disabling channel 1 and 2, just leave channel 3 as roll. Next one's pretty obvious, and is that every time you get into flashlight mode, make sure you always double tap the front trigger to recenter it. Because like I mentioned, if the gimbal is not perfectly level, even just by off a little bit, you're either going to get some jittery result, or the gimbal will just refuse to spin because it doesn't know which direction to go. So make sure you always double tap to recenter to keep the gimbal perfectly level. Now the next tip is to shoot slow motion. When you're doing infinite spin, sometimes you can still see a little bit of jitter and play. You don't have to shoot at 60 frames a second. Shoot at 30 frames down to 24 is enough to smooth that little bit of jitter out. The next tip for infinite spin is actually movement. Because you're in flashlight mode and all 3 motors are basically occupied, you're not going to be able to do any pan or tilt, so you're only left with movement like dolly in or dolly out. Think sideways called truck. Okay, so bring it up and down is called pedestal up and pedestal down, so do that. Now make sure when you're moving sideways, you are either walking with the gimbal or you are perfectly moving along one axis, because once you start panning like this, the gimbal is going to freak out. It's going to smash the camera into the arm. I'm not even going to get b-roll of that because it's pretty scary. Yeah, don't do it. But if that ever do happen, make sure to double tap on the power button. That will temporarily disable the motors and will probably save your Ronin-S and your camera, hopefully. I'll also recommend trying out different focal lengths. I personally like the look of 50mm and up. However, if you're shooting at 50 or 85, you gotta be very careful to not crop out anything. If you crop out anything, the shot's gonna look really weird. It's gonna feel like it's missing something. It's a street light or half of a building or half of a person's head. The longer the focal length you are, you gotta be more careful with your framing, which will lead to my last tip of using the infinite spin, and that is to frame your shots vertically. Now, not get into the whole IGTV vertical versus 16:9 versus widescreen format debate, but when you're spinning the gimbal, your camera sits vertically at some point during the spin, twice. And the reason why you have to frame vertically is because we're used to seeing and framing in 16:9 or even widescreen. We often forget about what the shot will look like when it's vertical. So make sure you frame your shots both horizontally and vertically so you can get the best results that you want. I forgot to grab b-roll for this, but here is how I frame my shots vertically. You grab your Ronin-S, double tap to disable the motor, and I just literally do this. Now, time for me to explain what was going on in the beginning and the thumbnail. So here was the thing, when I got the Ronin-S, I was very excited about infinite spin. I was running around shooting a bunch of stuff, and it occurred to me that I really want to do a time-lapse, but I couldn't find a way that I can hold the gimbal in flashlight mode for, say, 10 minutes when I'm doing the time-lapse. And then it occurred to me that I can boom the Ronin-S. Huh? Like, you know how you boom the boom pole during an interview? Kind of like what I'm doing here. So here is how you can boom your Ronin-S. Step 1, grab a heavy-duty light stand. Next thing, you grab a gobo head, throw it onto the light stand, grab your boom buddy, you slide the holder into the gobo head, and then you can slide your Ronin-S in. When you're sliding the Ronin-S into the boom pole holder, make sure you double tap the power button to disable the motors. Might be one of the dumbest things that I've done, but it worked. So if it works, it's not dumb. So yeah, if you have a C-stand, I highly recommend using a C-stand. The reason why I chose to use a light stand instead of a C-stand was I want to get an infinite spin time-lapse at Dumbo, Brooklyn. So I have to travel all the way from New Jersey to Brooklyn, and I was not going to carry a C-stand with me on the train and walking and in the subway. So yeah. Now, super important, whether you're using the light stand or the C-stand, make sure you sandbag that. Sandbag it, sandbag it. Okay, so now we have solved the problem on how to set the Ronin-S in flashlight mode forever, but now how do we capture the time lapse? I thought I could program something and just let the gimbal run itself, and didn't work. Maybe I'm just bad with apps and technology, but I just couldn't figure it out. If anyone figured out how to program the Ronin-S, please let me know in the comments, and you're amazing. But then there's a workaround with it. If you open your Ronin app and you go to create, you go to capture, and if you pull the top roll axis slider, it will start spinning. Now I know you're wondering, so Kevin, does that mean I have to keep my finger on my phone sliding all the way to the right or to the left at all times? Unfortunately, yes. Now I would recommend to keep the roll speed pretty low and then just keep your finger all the way to the right or to the left. For my setup with the GH5 Sigma 1835 with the Metabones, I actually could not go anywhere slower than 15. When I went under 15, say I got to 10 or even 8, the gimbal can still spin, but once it reaches a certain degree, almost upside down, the gimbal will just fail. It's not a balancing issue. I rebalanced it, put it back. It just couldn't. So originally, I thought maybe the gimbal is not designed to stay in flashlight mode and do infinite spin for a long period of time. But later on when I got home, I balanced the GH5 itself, so without the cage, the lens, or the Metabones, and I was able to complete a whole spin at a speed of 5. And from my testing, when the speed is at 5, the whole spin lasts about 7.5 to 8 minutes. When I was at Brooklyn, the setting at 15, I was able to get about 45 to 50 seconds, which is obviously not long enough, but still enough for me to get a shot like this. So if you're doing a time-lapse with infinite spin, make sure your setup is light enough. Okay, 2 things that I forgot to mention in the beginning. One is very obvious, is that you should balance your gimbal very well before you do an infinite spin, which makes sense, but make sure you're balancing the pan axis, this axis. I think the way to test it is hold it like this and see if it like spins around. When you're running the auto test in the Ronin app, it's not going to test the pan axis because, you know, the gimbal is sitting perfectly straight and not tilted. The second thing is a little bit less important. As you can see here that my setup, the center of the camera is about here. The lens is more toward the left side. So the lens actually like rotates around the center. So your framing, at least for this setup, is gonna move a little bit from the left to the right. So just keep that in mind. Try to balance the lens more center to the gimbal if you can. For me, I can't do that without adding some other weights. Not really a deal breaker. Most people aren't even gonna know this, so yeah, like whatever. So that's it for today's video. Hopefully you learned something today. Comment down below if you have any questions. I want to know how you guys plan to use infinite spin. Are you gonna boom the Ronin-S? Was that brilliant, or was that the dumbest thing that you have seen on internet today and that is enough internet, so you're shutting your laptop and you're going to bed? Let me know if you actually boomed your Ronin-S. Tag me in Instagram, I'll go like it, I'll go comment it. It will be freaking epic if you actually do it. But until then, I'll see you in the next video. Sorry if I'm like raining sweat from my head. It's 100 degrees here in Jersey. Oh god, it's burning hot. This video took so long to make. I lose all the golden hour sunlight. The video start out was still yellow-y-ish. Now it's just nothing. Sorry, the lighting is really bad. I'm using one single diffuser instead of setting the light dome up because I was lazy. You can kind of see the reflection of the reflector. Whoops. And like here, I think. I'm still kind of figuring out my setup. So yeah, bye.